This is Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.
Welcome back to another edition of Inside the News. So glad that you are with us this week, and we're going to be talking about the reopening of America, and that in itself is a huge topic. We're going to be talking about China. We're going to be talking about the Biden moments, and there are many, and then the hot button topics with our guys. Let's say hello to our guys today. How you doing today, Ben?
I'm doing just fine, Guy. It is a pleasure to be with you and Frank once again.
All right, and Frank Vernuccio. How you doing, Frank?
Looking forward to keeping our audience entertained and informed during quarantine.
Yeah, and you need to go on over there with de Blasio and say, come on, dude, get it together.
There's a lot of things a lot of New Yorkers would like to say de Blasio. Unfortunately, he's protected by police officers. Yeah.
All right, let's start with you then, Frank, right up there. And you're really in the cusp of it all. You're in the epicenter of not only this coronavirus and the pandemic in the United States, but maybe we'll be the last state to start getting this reopening, which is where we're going to start. Go.
Well, of course, New York State is a very large state, and the problem there is, how do you reopen part of the state without reopening other parts of the state? Far too often we're talking about a cookie-cutter approach in which an entire country or an entire state all has to be subjected to the same measures. But even here in New York State, in New York City in particular, which is the belly of the beast, there's beginning to be a rumble about why a farming community in upstate New York needs to be subjected to the same restrictions as those living in the middle of Midtown Manhattan. Clearly, there has to be some flexibility based on the type of community you're living in. We need to start looking at this as a single national type of regulation and go more county by county, depending on the rates of infection and the real threat of reinfection.
You know, Frank, you brought up a good point. You have the Adirondacks up there, beautiful country. That's pretty much secluded from the rest of the state. You have the Seneca Lake area, those Five Finger Lakes over there, and that's pretty much isolated. And I think Elgin, that's one area as well. So there's a lot of open areas in New York. People just think of it as Buffalo, Rochester, Albany, and New York City, don't they?
They certainly do. And again, the importance of this throughout the country is that we need not subject every part of the country to the same regulations. We have to be aware that for places like New York City or Chicago, some regulations are going to be in effect for a long, long time, possibly up to a year or more. And that's going to be necessary for a place like Midtown Manhattan. But it's not going to be necessary for a place like, say, Sioux City, Iowa, or Bismarck, North Dakota.
Yeah. Ben, let's look at our state that we're in. We're here in Florida. DeSantis has done things a little bit different, although this is a whole different area, and we're benefiting from sunshine. And we just found out about a week or 10 days ago that sunshine has a way of kind of knocking this virus down.
Well, according to the science, and that we supposedly are going on a science-based approach to this. And let's talk about the two facts that we can say for sure from the shutdown. One, we have flattened the curve successfully. That was the stated goal of this nationwide shutdown. It has been achieved. And the other thing we can say is we are essentially throwing the U.S. economy into a depression, and this has to end. The cost, the toll, not only in the U.S. but globally, but let's talk about our country first. The toll being imposed on Americans. There are over 30 million newly unemployed Americans. These numbers are catastrophic in the least. Businesses are being destroyed across the country. We've achieved the scientific goal. Now we have to reopen this economy very rapidly, and the science tells us the way to do it. Although what's interesting to me is once science gets into the politically unacceptable, so whenever you start talking about demographics in science, you can't go there. So there's not a lot of discussion around the age differences and the vulnerable populations. We know the vulnerable populations. It's the elderly, retired community, and those who are young and have morbidities or chronic conditions such as diabetes. that make them vulnerable, or cancer survivors. Those people need to stay isolated basically until there's a vaccine. But the rest of this country can open up. Everyone under 40, for the most part, is not adversely affected by this virus, no more so than the regular flu. And we have to open up based on that assumption. We can do it. We can do it quickly, and it has to start underway. It's amazing to me how this whole discussion of reopening the economy is morphed into a political one, left versus right. You see a lot of Democratic governors arguing for an extended shutdown through the summer. Odd enough, and coincidentally, that would push this horrible economy right up to the doorstep of the November election. And you have to think at this point that that is the driving motivator for a lot of Democratic governors, including in states that have not been really hit that hard whatsoever, states like Maine, which ought to be opening up right now. And yet the Democratic governor of Maine is talking about extending this shutdown for weeks, if not months. So the political motivation here has become pretty obvious.
You know, Ben then segued to the governors versus the federal government and how that's going to be going here, Frank. And then we've got Trump and the doctors, and now there's talk, and this is not on our sheet, but that Fauci and the WHO, that they might have been in cahoots. We don't know that. That's just some talk on that. But it seems like there's the doctor side, the health side, there's the economic side, which Ben has alluded to wonderfully, that if we don't get this country started up and going again, not only does this country need it, but the rest of the world depends on the United States as well, Frank.
Well, I deal regularly with a number of small business organizations, and they are telling me that dramatic numbers of their membership will not be able to reopen at all if this continues much longer. It's one thing for an individual to hunker down. It's another thing for a business that has an ongoing mortgage, that has product suppliers, that has employees, etc., has ongoing expenses, to linger in limbo for X amount of time. They will not be able to reopen at all. And since 40% of new job creation in the United States comes from small business, if they go down, this temporary depression will become a significantly longer depression that could last for a decade or more. Ben is exactly right. We have to rescue this economy, open up where we can do it safely, but most of all, understand that this is not a cookie-cutter approach, that we have to open up segments of the economy where we can, and we have to open them up quickly, taking whatever safety precautions are viable.
Ben, there are people in this country that are desperately wanting to get back to normal, and they really are. And people, believe it or not, they miss their sports more than they even realize they miss their sports. There are non-sports fans who are now realizing how much of an integral part sports has become a part of their lives, whether it be golf or just some simple things. And NASCAR is going to be opening up here. And that is going to be impacted again because now they're talking about this second wave, Ben.
Well, I think this is going to be the big issue, and this will become the political football for the next handful of months as we go into the November election. And that's going to be, Trump is pushing to open the economy. Republican governors are opening the economy, like Florida right now, leading the way. But of course, we're going to hear about the rise in infections and rise in the death rate. And this is greed over health and safety. This is the narrative that's going to take place. And it's a false narrative. We can't, the cost of this shutdown is so enormous. It is so devastating to the economy, to millions of families. I can't tell you how many families I know who are struggling to the point of extreme depression. People are facing financial ruin all across the country. And these safety net programs are great and they help, but they are not a substitute for reopening the economy, which we have to do. And we have to accept the fact that, yes, reopening means infections will rise again. and there'll be greater deaths than if we have a shutdown economy, but we can't afford to have a shutdown economy.
No.
We could take this approach to anything. We could shut down our highway system and save 250,000 horrible injuries every year and 30 to 40,000 deaths. But we don't do that. We accept that that's the cost of having a highway system that drives our economy. And you mentioned sports. Sports are emblematic of this whole debate. People are hungry to get sports back online. And I think you can predict what's going to happen. There are going to be one or two sporting events that come online, like the NFL draft, hardly a sporting event, but a derivative of sporting event that had record ratings. And these sporting events that come online, and I think there's a NASCAR race coming up, will have huge ratings. And I think that's going to open the floodgates to the soccer season restarting in Europe and around the world, and to the NBA talking about a limited season, and at least having a normal NFL season coming up and college football season. And so the country is hungry for it. It's going to happen. And the sooner the better, in my opinion.
You know, some people think that women don't like sports. Well, that's not exactly true. And then the women who don't like sports, they like to get together with the other women who don't like sports because their husbands do like sports, and they like the times when they can eat and have those little get-togethers and the tailgate parties, Frank.
Well, that's true. And there's something else coming up. I was speaking to someone in the entertainment industry who mentioned that we are in a sort of strange period. The end of the winter shows, the winter TV series, has come about. If you watch any of the regular ones, you'll see that they're having their final episodes and all that sort of thing. The summer episodes either haven't begun or haven't even filmed because of the COVID virus. That means that the substitute normally at this time of year on television is sports. Now there's no sports to watch on TV. Americans are not only quarantined in their homes, but there's nothing good on TV to watch. And that's going to make the population even far more restive than it already is.
In our pre-production notes, you alluded to a Hill article. You want to elaborate on that?
Well, when the Spanish flu, the 1918 flu, came about, the first wave, of course, was terrible. But the second wave, after they thought it was over, became even more severe than the first wave. That's what's concerning most public officials about returning to normalcy, whether in fact we can go back and not have devastating losses, worse even than the first wave. There are differences, though, between 1918 and now. We are more aware of how infections spread. We are more aware of what remedial steps to take. So the fear that continuously is brought up about the second wave of the Spanish flu, and indeed the third wave, doesn't necessarily apply. The danger is there, but the knowledge that society has gained in that century plus since 1918 is significant as well.
All right, we're going to talk about the Flynn case in our Picking Up the Pieces segment number 4. But I want to talk about the true heroes because it kind of blends in with this. And Ben, even when I went to the store today, a little bit earlier, they're all wearing masks and everything, but they have been there the whole time. Not just the healthcare workers, the nurses and the doctors, but these people that have been in grocery stores and running the pumps at the gas stations, Ben.
Well, absolutely. And they are heroes and they've been on the front lines, but they're also a great object lesson. We've had people out there. We've had stores operating, grocery stores, among other things. Home Depots have been open largely. So these stores have been successfully operating, which means we can do this. We can open up. There's really no theoretical difference between having one type of store open versus another. We know what the precautions that need to be done. Publix and other grocery store chains have done a good job of putting up plexiglass to protect customers from the cashiers and vice versa. We know that we need masks. We know that we need gloves in certain cases where there's a lot of handling of items and merchandise. So we know what to do. We just need to implement it. And if we can do it in one industry, we can do it across most industries in this country. Maybe some industries have to wait a little bit, but virtually the vast majority of this country is ready to go, ready to open. We know what to do. We have education. To Frank's point, the difference between now and a century ago is the level of education and knowledge about what's happening. So we come armed with knowledge, and that's what we need to do to reopen successfully.
That was Ben Brunson. He's the author of the Falstaff, Enigma, and Esther, Sling. You can find Ben's books at Amazon.com. You can also find more about Ben at benbrunson.com. Frank Vernuccio, he's with the American Analysis of News and Media. You can find Frank at usagovpolicy.com, and you can find more about all three of us at our website, itnradio.com. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We're so glad that you're with us. We're 5 shows away from starting 6 years being on the radio with you, keeping you informed and going inside the news. We'll be back.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.